Il y a qu'à appuyer ou bien? Même pas en faisant ça. Ah. Et la vidéo, elle est là? Non, non, c'est faux ça. C'est pas le bon ordre. Non, non, je vois que c'est Vanessa. Ah, sûr. D'accord. Je mets la vidéo.
Hands do more than wave, 'cause hands can kill and they can save. You are the key. Life's in your hands, so sing with me. You are the key. Life's in your hands, so sing with me. Hands are such a simple thing, but our hands can change most everything. Keep care safe, give life a chance. Keep care for all, it's in your hands. Hands are such a simple thing, but our hands can change most everything. Keep care safe and take a stand. Keep care for all, it's in your hands. Safe, clean care saves lives. Rubbing our hands helps us survive. Come and join the fight. Demand clean care, it is your right. Come and join the fight. Demand clean care, it is your right. Hands are such a simple thing, but our hands can change most everything. Keep care safe, give life a chance. Keep care for all, it's in your hands. Hands are such a simple thing, but our hands can change most everything. Keep care safe and take a stand. Keep care for all, it's in your hands. All around the world.
All around the world.
Let's join our hands.
Let's join our hands.
Let's be heard.
And let's be heard.
Rub your hands for you.
Rub your hands for you.
For those you love.
For those you love.
And patience too.
And patience too.
All around the world. Let's rub our hands. And let's be heard. Hands are such a simple thing, but our hands can change most everything. Keep care safe, give life a chance. Keep care for all, it's in your hands. Hands are such a simple thing, but our hands can change most everything. Keep care safe and take a stand. Keep care for all, it's in your hands. It's in your hands. It's in your hands. It's in your hands.
So welcome to ICPIC. We'll start the official ceremony. This was the song of the last 5th of May, as you know. For those who are interested in voting for the videos that have been submitted for the ICPIC Video Clip Award, you can access those videos. Please come on the podium and have a seat. Follow Andreas, maybe. And you can vote for those videos, and you will see that in Vietnam, they have translated the video in Vietnamese, right? And if you like to hear about Vietnamese, clean hands, or it's in your hands, you can look at these videos. So welcome to ICPIC. This is the usual atmosphere of ICPIC. to welcome you and to try to remind you about all what happened over the past 2 years. Without further ado, I would like to start with the opening ceremony, inviting people who are helping us and supporting us in organizing this meeting. And this is absolutely key and critical, as you can imagine. So to start with, it's my great pleasure to invite to the podium Bertrand Levrat, who is our CEO. And you know, our hospital is supporting this meeting, and in particular, by participating in the travel grants that we can offer to many of the fellows, young or less young, from developing countries. Bertrand Levrat, thank you very much for delivering your message.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome in Geneva. First of all, I have some official protocol salutations to do. First of all, à Monsieur le Conseiller d'État, Mauro Poggia, merci d'être avec nous en tant que ministre de la Santé. À la représentante de l'Organisation mondiale de la Santé, un grand plaisir et un honneur pour les HUG d'être votre partenaire, non seulement au quotidien, mais aujourd'hui également. Et puis, évidemment, nous avons un représentant de la Confédération, de l'Office fédéral de la santé publique, et merci à Monsieur Charrière d'être avec nous. Enfin, I would like to thank the organizers of ICPIC, because without them, we would not be all of us here, and without their energy as well, we would not be able to be all together for the fifth time into this ICPIC ceremony. So thank you, Didier, of course, Andreas Voss, and Stefan Arbart, the three of you. Where is Stefano? He's there. Well, thank you to the three of you, because as a CEO, I must say that I'm very privileged to work with people like Didier and Stefan. Andreas, we haven't managed to take you away and to come to Geneva, but please, we can discuss afterwards. No, I'm kidding. With Didier and Stefan, I must say that I'm a privileged person, because they not only have energy all the time, sometimes too much energy, but no, never too much energy. But I must say I will speak on behalf of all the hospital directors in the world to thank you, each one of you, because infection and prevention of infection control is just absolutely necessary in a hospital, in any health structure. And as we could see on the video, we have progressed a lot about hand hygiene, but we do know that it's just the first step. And all these steps are possible in hospitals because you are here, because your involvement, because the implication you have is absolutely essential to the health system. So I would like, first of all, to thank you all for what you're doing every day in your hospitals, for society, for the health system, and thank to the team I have in Geneva for the work you do every day. Thank you very much, Didier, and thank you, Stefan, as well. Thank you, really. My second message is something a bit particular in all our organization, and especially in the HUG, the Geneva University Hospital. In English, it's HUG, which I find very nice to have a hospital called HUG, because somehow it's exactly what we try to do when we care about patients. We wash our hands before we hug, of course. But today, what we are doing and experimenting with ICPIC is also patients' participation, which is something extremely important we do in Geneva as well. For a very long time, hospitals have been centered around doctors, and it was an organization centered around doctors. And today, it is networks organized around patients. And this is a change of paradigm, which is major, and that involves patients into the participation of our solutions on the way they see our organizations and how they should evolve. And this is extremely important here in Geneva. It's very important for us as well to see that ICPIC is also taking this way, and that patients are in the room today and are going to address what they see as the evolution we need to do. And that's, I must say, I'm very grateful for the patients who are here today, and thank you very much to be here. Last thing, but it's important. We talk about the Geneva spirit. What is it all about? Geneva spirit is about exchange. It's about new friends to meet. I like really very much this speech. And for those of you who were here 2 years ago, I said the same thing. There are no foreigners only new friends to meet. So enjoy this Geneva spirit, which is about exchanges, which is about sharing, which is about constructing a better world together. I very much believe into this. So welcome in Geneva. I hope you will have a very fruitful meeting. And again, thank you for your participation. Thank you to be here. We are not here just to observe the world. We're here to make it better and to make it change. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure now to introduce Mauro Poggia, who is our Ministry of Health. He has many other duties, but I will make it simple. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. Merci.
Merci, professeur Pittet. Merci, monsieur le directeur général. Mesdames et messieurs, chers tous, au nom du Conseil d'État de la République Canton de Genève, c'est pour moi un grand plaisir de vous souhaiter une chaleureuse bienvenue ici pour la 5e conférence internationale pour la prévention et le contrôle des infections. Je voudrais exprimer toute la fierté du canton de Genève de pouvoir accueillir cet événement biennal qui réunit depuis 10 ans maintenant les meilleurs experts du monde, dont vous êtes, experts dans le domaine de la prévention des infections et de la lutte contre la résistance aux antimicrobiens. Je voudrais souligner combien le canton de Genève a la chance d'avoir pu développer une expérience remarquable dans ce domaine grâce à la présence de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé qui est représentée aujourd'hui et j'aurai l'occasion de la saluer un peu plus tard, et grâce aussi au travail des hôpitaux universitaires de Genève dont vous venez d'entendre le directeur général. Je voudrais rappeler que c'est ici, dans notre ville de Genève, qu'un modèle a été développé pour prévenir les infections, combinant des soins propres avec des soins plus sûrs et nous rappelant la nature cruciale de l'hygiène des mains pour réduire les infections liées aux soins. Pratiquement tous les pays du monde ont adopté ce modèle genevois, comme nous pourrions l'appeler, suite au lancement en 2005 par l'OMS en partenariat avec les HUG du premier défi mondial pour la sécurité des patients. Je voudrais rappeler aussi qu'en mai de cette année, la 72e Assemblée mondiale de la santé a approuvé la création de la Journée mondiale de la sécurité des patients qui sera désormais célébrée chaque 17 septembre. C'est donc dans moins d'une semaine. Tant cette journée mondiale que le choix de l'ICPIC de mettre le patient au centre de son programme cette année indique un changement dans le paradigme des soins de la santé. Je veux observer comment, aujourd'hui, les soins de santé s'articulent moins autour des professionnels de la santé que des patients. Ce changement est évident à tous les niveaux. Il met l'accent sur l'autonomisation et la prise de conscience des patients. Il souligne leurs droits. Les patients ont pris leur place au centre de l'équation médicale et c'est en soi, bien sûr, une excellente nouvelle. Nous devons souligner combien la prévention de la transmission des infections, que ce soit en milieu hospitalier ou dans tout autre dispositif de soins, on pense bien sûr aux maisons de convalescence, aux maisons de retraite, aux cabinets médicaux ou les soins à domicile, joue un rôle primordial dans la sécurité des soins de la santé. Cette sécurité dépend par ailleurs du comportement des patients, bien sûr, ainsi que de l'attention des membres de leur famille, de leurs amis, de leurs proches aidants parfois, qui participent tous à créer un environnement sûr. Au cours de la dernière décennie, ce message a été formulé avec éloquence par l'OMS dans sa campagne mondiale annuelle sur l'hygiène des mains, comme l'illustre le message du 5 mai de cette année, « Des mains propres pour tous, c'est entre vos mains ». On l'a vu tout à l'heure avec ce merveilleux clip, c'est entre vos mains, il faut évidemment le rappeler constamment. Je relève que le concept de responsabilité constitue également un concept clé lorsqu'on aborde la question de la résistance aux antibiotiques. Il y a 2 ans, la Journée mondiale de l'hygiène des mains s'est penchée sur cette question cruciale, question que l'ICPIC a également choisi de traiter cette année. Il est en effet pertinent de lier la prévention des infections et la résistance aux antibiotiques. À cet égard, le contrôle de la résistance aux antimicrobiens par l'utilisation ciblée d'antibiotiques relève d'une responsabilité partagée entre plusieurs acteurs du secteur de la santé. Cette responsabilité implique les médecins, bien sûr, qui prescrivent des antibiotiques, les patients sous traitement antibiotique, les sociétés pharmaceutiques qui développent de nouvelles molécules, les autorités de santé publique qui délivrent les autorisations de commercialiser ces molécules et enfin les scientifiques, vous mesdames et messieurs, qui cherchent à mieux comprendre le phénomène de la résistance antimicrobienne. Cela représente un défi mondial qui mobilise plusieurs projets de recherche européens, dont un qui est piloté par les hôpitaux universitaires de Genève. Je me réjouis donc que l'ICPIC puisse offrir une plateforme internationale unique aux membres de la communauté scientifique pour partager leurs connaissances et leur expérience en matière de prévention des infections liées aux soins de santé et de contrôle de la résistance aux antimicrobiens. Elle réunit aussi bien les professionnels de la santé que les autorités concernées. En cela, elle est remarquable. Je conclurai en saluant la présence aujourd'hui de Madame la professeure Hanan Balki, qui est directrice générale adjointe de l'OMS, dont je parlais il y a un instant, et spécialiste de la résistance antimicrobienne, ainsi que de Monsieur Roland Charrière, de l'Office fédéral de la santé publique au niveau de la Confédération suisse. Mesdames et messieurs, je vous remercie pour votre attention. Je vous souhaite évidemment une conférence pleine de succès et surtout pleine d'enseignements pour chacune et chacun de vous. Merci et bonne soirée.
Thank you very much. It's now a privilege to host our Swiss government, and in particular the Federal Office for Public Health. Monsieur Roland Charrière will address to you now. Thank you very much. And I guess he will tell you something about the subject, right? Maybe.
Maybe. Thank you very much. Dear participants, dear experts, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to welcome you to the 5th International Conference on Prevention and Infection Control. This conference offers a unique forum for participants to exchange knowledge and experience in the prevention of healthcare-associated infections and control of antimicrobial resistance around the world. My office, the Swiss Federal Office of Public Health, is proud to support this event and the participation of many representatives of low and middle income countries. The mission of this conference is to improve patient safety everywhere, at any time. And, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, ICPIC brings all patients to the conversation table. You are warmly welcome. Patient safety is a global health priority. There have been many success stories, and patient safety has improved. As Mr. Poggia said, the WHO Save Lives, Clean Your Hands annual global campaign was launched in 2009. More than 20,000 hospitals and healthcare facilities all around the world have registered their commitment to this campaign. As any other patient, I personally thank Professor Didier Pittet for this great success. Nevertheless, there is still much to be done. 134 million adverse events occur each year due to unsafe care in hospitals in low and middle income countries, contributing to 2.6 million deaths annually. In exactly 1 week, we will celebrate the very first World Patient Safety Day. Its compelling slogan is "Speak up for patient safety." Of course, we hope to see many of you at the shores of Lake Geneva in order to admire the jet d'eau illuminated in orange. This day represents an important milestone in our common endeavor, the global strengthening of patient safety. Switzerland is proud to contribute to this important cause and to follow the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with the organization of the 5th Global Ministerial Summit on Patient Safety on 27th and 28th February 2020 in Montreux. from implementation of WHO guidelines on core components of infection prevention and control programs to implementation of antibiotic stewardship programs. Many issues in the prevention of healthcare-associated infections and control of antimicrobial resistance will be addressed during this summit. We hope that the spirit of the internationally famous Montreux Jazz Festival will spread to the summit and catalyze lively discussions as well as valuable insights. I do not mean the spirit of the well-known Smoke on the Water from Deep Purple. In this sense, we look forward to welcoming experts and high-level representatives from all over the world to the picturesque shores of Lake Geneva next year. Dear participants, dear experts, I wish every success with your conference and enjoy the wonderful town of Geneva. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the World Patient Safety Summit, Ministerial Patient Safety Summit, as you understand, will be in Switzerland next year, and we are very proud and looking forward for this summit. You will hear about it more later. Now it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce my friend Anan, who recently was chosen as a new ADG at WHO. Anan, please, we cannot kiss you anywhere in the world, but here we can. So Anan for WHO.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Didier. Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a true honor to be here with you tonight in the opening ceremony of ICPIC number 5, the first one 2011, where I was on the scientific committee from the very beginning. So it's a true honor and pleasure to see how ICPIC now has been really one of the leading entities in the scientific field to join the infectious disease and infection control in providing the guidance that we actually need. I think within this meeting, there's a mix of actually infectious diseases, stewardship, infection prevention and control, and within this venue, within this entity that we have, and it's being at a repeated events, that I hope that there will be a lot of networking and a lot of sharing of information. Very briefly, it is around the globe that there are very devastated transmissions of infection pathogens. There's Ebola, cholera, MERS-CoV, but those are the pathogens that are actually taking the headline news. They're the ones that are capturing it. But in this room, every single one of you understand the mandate and the demand of addressing the Enterobacteriaceae, the gram-negatives and the gram-positives. These pathogens do not take the headline news. And is it not without all of you in this room who keep trying to find solutions for preventing the transmission of these pathogens? And again, I stepped in a very different world 5 months ago, but again, it is these types of events where the sharing of the information, the knowledge, and electrifying the junior people to really try to adopt the science and try to have a ripple effect within their communities to really bring infection prevention control, stewardship, ID, all under one hat within their organization. Again, I'll be very honest, I prepared something, but I'm really bad in reading what I actually write. So I'll just ad lib. I think so my past career for the past 20 years was really following Didier's footsteps. I was a hospital epidemiologist, clinician at the bedside, IPC, trying to convince people to wash their hand at the 5 moments, trying to put the secret shoppers at night, during the weekends, really knowing that we have not succeeded since 2005 to go above 50, 60% at any good day, let alone when you have the other hospital at night and on weekends where the compliance rates can drop below 40. So we are definitely doing something that is not correct. The other entity is that all of this knowledge that we have, being at the WHO, at the core of their business for the past 5 months, I'm really seeing things from a very different perspective. The knowledge that is being shared in such meetings and committees is only reaching, at the best, 5–10% to where it should be utilized. So one of the promises that I took upon myself after starting in this new job is that we really need to emphasize on the networking that happens within these societies and to engage as much as possible people from this entity to be working with agencies like ministries of health, agriculture, environment. They need to hear more of the disaster that we in this room are very much aware of, and they are not. And that is a reality, by the way. So one of my colleagues who just greeted me at the door said, Hanan, how has it been? Is it positive or negative? I'm like, well, it's a very different world at WHO. Dealing with 196 member states, dealing with countries where you're really focusing on talking to ministers of health and ministries, we really need to figure out how can we, you guys, as the engine, the brains, the passion of IPC, ID stewardship, how can you take the messages that you know and bring it out of your institutions, out of your organizations to be implemented at the bedside? AMR now has reached to a global attention, and I think it is the threat for modern medicine. And us as physicians and healthcare providers, that is a true problem. So I really wish for the younger generation to go back with ammunition of energy and passion, to go back to their countries and try to create a ripple effect of the knowledge that they gain here. I hope that the scientists are going to be able to provide us at WHO and other agencies with the real science that's beneficial for us to negotiate and implement the impact that we need to prevent the spread and emergence of pathogens. And I can assure you that during my term at the WHO, I'm trying to, as much as possible, connect with as many societies, scientific societies, civil societies, and experts in the field to help us not only move this huge Titanic forward, but really to find ways to become partners with us on creating a true impact for mitigating AMR globally. So I wish you a very good meeting, and I really hope that it will bring the benefits that we all hope for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will propose to our hosts to gain their seats because they will be more comfortable while Andreas and myself, but in particular Andreas, will try to summarize ICPIC 2019 for you in a few slides right now. So Andreas, you are already 3 minutes late, so I'll let you do it the best you can.
And thanks to the extra 20 slides I got from Didier, I probably will be even later. Just welcome from me too. Just a quick householding messages. Please have a look and make sure that you got the mobile app, as well as on the back of your text you will find all the access to internet you need. Why do you need the internet access? Not to look up things or anything, but to tweet, I hope. So the idea is that we make this a very interactive and very social media active conference. Please use the hashtag ICPIC 2019, and please put more secondary hashtags to it, like patient included or hashtag hand hygiene or whatever you like and whatever is appropriate, obviously. Then the network events are always fun. After this, we're having drinks, which is always very welcome. And we are very thankful for the Canton of Geneva for sponsoring the meet and greet. And most importantly, there is on Thursday the circus night. And I hope that you already trained your voices to participate in karaoke and have your clown costume along, because those with the best costumes and the worst singing will get prizes. Or the best singing, I don't know. If we look into more, what did you deliver to this? This were 636 abstracts were received, which is about 20–30% more than we had in the past. It's amazing, as you can see from the countries. It's not only the Northern European, it's also lower middle income countries like Brazil, India, and probably after the Brexit, I should mention United Kingdom too, that actually came with the abstracts to this meeting. So that obviously with so many abstracts, you need a lot of reviewers. These are the people you should thank if you are part of the program. If you're not, don't make sure that you couldn't read their names. But we are very, very thankful to all the abstract reviewers, and the present in the slide is the only one they will ever get. So what did they do? They selected 62 oral papers and 505 post-its, which you can enjoy over the following days. And unfortunately, 11% of our abstracts needed to be rejected, but try it again over 2 years, I would say. It's getting better every single time as we look at the science. Then the abstract should be online. We were promised already several days that they are online the next morning. We are still waiting for that. I'm sorry for that, but it should come really, really fast in ERIC, all the abstracts of this meeting. It is online now? Oh, sure. It is online. I think that the program is very, very special, but I'm slightly biased with that. Still, these are the people who really worked on the invited part on the program, and you can see that it's a wide variety from all countries, and they were actively involved in putting together, hopefully, a really great days for you. If you look at the invited speakers and chairs, again, there's a little bit of a burden to the Northern European countries, but I put on this slide the top 10, and by categorizing number 10 in 1 to 3, I could have a great number 10 with a lot of countries in there where we really go for and like to see the speakers. But as a Dutchman, I am proud to say that I shouldn't be proud to say, that the Congo has even as many speakers here as the Dutch. So something went wrong in the Netherlands. We used to be higher. What's new at ICPIC? We already had the pre-ICPIC workshop, so I don't talk about it anymore. There is the WHO Global Survey as a workshop. Most importantly, with Volcover, together with them, we created a vascular access track over 2 days, pinpointing that you got all the experts from this society who will talk about vascular access, and ICPIC is now a patient-included conference, but we're not doing it for this nice logo and nice logo only. Most importantly, on Wednesday at 13:15 in room 4, there is a patient participation platform, which is from and with patients for us all to discuss. So we're really looking forward to the session, and you will see their inclusion throughout the program. And it was already mentioned by several of the other speakers how important this shift is. Then there's a new thing, the quiz. For all those people who like to win stuff, there are 5 books to be won. Go ahead and fill in the questions every day. It's a SurveyMonkey link. It's in your bag, in your conference bag. You find all you need to take part in this quiz. And I hope many of you will do. There's another survey in there because you're coming here also not only to enjoy Geneva and the meeting, but also to work. And by filling in this survey, you're helping Didier and his team in looking into EMOIS in infection control. So go ahead and please fill it in. It's slightly directed to hand hygiene, I could say. As I already mentioned, there's a WHO workshop, but also we would like to point out another global survey, which you can also fill in. Benedetta will be extremely thankful if you do so. And there is the Private Organization for Patient Safety, POPS, which have a booth here, which we like you to visit. Then most importantly, one of the first things created by Didier was the innovation at the Innovation Academy, and which was made possible by the Fondation Hubert Thuor, and I probably mispronounced it terribly, but go and look at the program, and I think in all the years this was one of the highlights of the meeting. The clip was already mentioned, but wasn't mentioned, that we need your votes, and you can vote until 12th of September, 16:30. And there's a late breaker on Ebola disease in DRC, which is most certainly worthwhile your time. So even though it's a little bit later, please join them tomorrow at 17:45. The travel fellowships were already mentioned, and you can hardly read their names, and that's because it's so many. They're growing every single year. And all of this has to do
with the generous sponsoring from Hug, I learned you have to pronounce it, from Hug and from others who contributed to the Travel Fellowship. So thank you all for doing that, and this goes even down to individuals. Last but not least, this is so far the biggest ICPIC ever. We have people here from 97 countries and more than 1,200 participants, which is more than we ever had before, and it might still be growing. So you couldn't do a meeting like this without the sponsorship, and I especially would like to express our gratitude to the platinum sponsor, Seraya, and the silver sponsor, Diversi, but also the other ones. If you are a bronze sponsor nowadays, you still have a chance to become a silver or platinum next year. And the same holds true to everyone else. All the sponsors, and there's too many to show in one slide, but without their support, we wouldn't be able to organize this meeting. And I want to make sure that you see that within the sponsors are also our cooperating societies, like in this one, ESCMID, or here, SHEA, or Swiss NOZO, and others that support this meeting. Thank you very, very much for your support. This meeting wouldn't be possible without it. It also wouldn't be possible without the organizers. And I'll put those three in here, and every single time I mention two, really the heavy lifting, all the hard work is actually done in Geneva by Didier and Stefan, and those are the ones, if things go well, you should go there. If it's terrible, you tell me, because, but it's really, this is where all the hard work is being done. And they wouldn't be able to do that without a support team. It's a local support team of Mohamed, Esther, Schön, Claude, Rosalie, and Romain. And I think those people were working really, really, really hard over the last months and then certainly last days on top of everything, because Didier somehow knows to put people to work. Last slide. You couldn't do a meeting also without your PCO. MCI is now supporting for the 5th time this meeting, and they're doing a brilliant job with that. In the past, it used to be the lady on the left, Lara, who was in charge. This time, Lara and Coralie changed positions. So all our thanks to Coralie, Lara, John, Malise, and Humbert for their hard work. And last but not least, a little reminder that during the meeting, please use a lot of Twitter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. Only you can do it this way. So I will show you now a very, very short video. You will understand why. I will ask the team to come and remove the seats. You can do it. That's no problem. It's not while I'm speaking, you can do it. It's no problem. So I will show you a video that you will understand by itself. It's a big event. We are linked today with a meeting that is happening actually in Ghana, and you will understand immediately. And some of us had to choose between one and the other meeting.
Member States' commitments were embodied in the resolution adopted at the recent World Health Assembly. I urge you to offer all your support.
Illness.
Frustration.
Shocking.
A fundamental human right.
Dignity. It has to be dignity.
Leaving no one behind.
If you cannot ensure a good quality of care at the healthcare facility, where else?
The resolution is approved.
Transformation.
Cornerstone.
A fundamental building block.
Compassion.
Hope.
Life.
Healing.
indispensable respect.
It's the future. It should be something so basic and so integrated in our healthcare facilities.
And that's a social justice issue for populations across the world.
So I hope we will all have these hospitals and this image in our mind during this meeting. Thank you very much. And now it's place for our scientific part of this opening ceremony, and I let Stefan lead the session. Thank you.
Good evening. So it's my great pleasure now to open the second part of this opening ceremony. As you heard, we will have patient-included and patient-centered ICPIC 2019. So that means that throughout the program, we will have special sessions that are even marked in your program that are also dedicated to patients, and we hope that there will be a little bit of a starter of exchange, because it's true that we speak, of course, a lot about patient safety, but in reality, in the past, we haven't included patients in these kind of conferences. So we will have now 3 20-minute blocks, all about patient inclusiveness, patient participation, patient awareness. And as you all know, during the opening ceremony, we don't have time for questions and answers sessions. So if you have specific questions to the speakers, of course, you're more than welcome to join them at the aperitif after this kind of opening session. So now it's my great pleasure to invite our first speaker, who is Vanessa Carter. She is a patient from Johannesburg in South Africa. She suffered herself a serious nosocomial healthcare-related MRSA infection in the past. She has now become a very prominent patient representative, is participating as a scholar in the South African Antibiotic Stewardship Program. She's an e-scholar at Stanford University. She's also a patient reviewer for the BMJ and has lots of speaking engagements around the world, including the African Union. So please, let us congratulate and welcome Vanessa Carter. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you. Hi. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. Thank you. Okay, so as you heard, I am a patient representative, but I'm also from South Africa, which is really makes it even harder for me to talk to you today. So there's other organisations that I stand for as well, which is the South African Antibiotic Stewardship Program, Aspires, which is part of Imperial College, where I work as a patient representative in their medical research group, and the Africa CDC as part of the Civil Society Organisation and Engagement Champion. I'm also the chair of the Health IT Special Interest Group at the Public Health Association of South Africa. And I've also won an award for the Foundation for Innovative New Diagnostics. So the first thing I've got to do, obviously, is share my story as a patient, which is quite difficult. So what I'm going to do is share what they did at Stanford University for me through a video, and I'll talk more in terms of, in detail, of what happened to me as a patient. I was reading a magazine, a car, my face was on the left, and moving
hit the dashboard where a radio was. Driving the car. So the seatbelt pulled on my stomach and I smashed most of the bones on the right side of my face. I lost the right eye. And eventually I got taken through to... I was in the Johannesburg hospital for about a month on breathing machines, on life support. And I came out I just remember waking up and looking at a white ceiling. I didn't realize that I'd been in an accident. I just heard people around me talking. One of the doctors speaking to my mum, telling her about my chances of survival that night and what surgery I had to go through next. I was in a lot of pain. Eventually, after that month of being there, I was discharged. And I didn't know where to begin. I knew there was a lot of damage to my face, but I was never really sure where I had to start. I had to spend a lot of time researching on exactly what kind of surgeons I needed. There was a microsurgeon and a cosmetic surgeon and a reconstructive surgeon and then a craniofacial surgeon, and then it overlapped into a craniofacial maxillofacial surgeon. It was just extremely confusing. And I was finding myself running between the specialists with written notes with terms I'd never heard of, and complications that could happen if the other surgeon did the surgery in areas that they were working. To get them to talk to each other was extremely difficult. So 7 years down the line of failing surgeries, I ended up with a bad infection. So I remember I went to the shop one day. I walked out of the shop and suddenly there was a whole lot of fluid coming out of my face. I didn't know what it was. So I got hold of one of my doctors. Within a couple of days, we had to do a debridement of the prosthetic that was in my face. And it was ongoing. We would do the debridement, and 2 months later, I would get the infection back again, but worse. A year down the line, it was so bad that every day I was looking in the mirror to clean my face from this infection. I could almost see the prosthetics coming through the skin, and by then I'd really lost huge portions of my face. So my plastic surgeon said to me, look, I don't care if you sue me, I'm taking this prosthetic out because the infection is on there and it won't go away until we take it out. And so he did. He had it tested and it was riddled with MRSA, with antibiotic resistance. I didn't know what MRSA was. Eventually, I read on the internet that taking these antibiotics were actually feeding the bacteria. And I just started searching the internet for as many of the best doctors I could find. Eventually, somebody replied, and it was a face transplant surgeon. So he explained to me what needed to be done. And at the end of that call, he said to me, now take this information and go find a doctor that mimics it, which I did. And eventually I found one who was classed as one of the best in the world. So I went to him and we did the surgeries, and within 2 surgeries in 8 months, my face was perfect. And for all those 10 years, I used to have to cover my face with eye pads, glasses, you name it. I couldn't show people my face. I couldn't walk out into public because I would just get stares. And that day was the best day of my life, that I could walk out and I felt like a human being again. So, thank you. So this was the last photo that I took at age 25 before my accident. I don't remember much of it. I just remember that I was in the Johannesburg Academic Hospital in high care. I had a 30% chance of survival. These were most of my injuries. So it wasn't just my face. I broke my nose, I broke my jaw, smashed my right maxillary sinus, had an orbital blowout, lost a right eye, severe facial lacerations. I fractured my pelvis, neck injury, back injury, and so forth.
This was me recovering on my mother's couch, for the next year. I had to learn how to drive. I had to learn how to go back to what I was doing at the time, which was graphic design, and a 6-year road accident funded trial. So that was back in 2004. It was 9 years of surgeries. The biggest surgeries were on my face. The reason they were on my face was because it was so complicated. I needed different types of super specialists, but I'll get to that now. So this was kind of the damage that was caused at that point in time. This was the first CT scan that I did, where you can actually see on the left-hand side, there was a silicone implant already implanted by the Johannesburg Hospital. 6 years down the line, in 2010, I started investigating. I'd already done other surgeries, which was a med paw, had different types of prosthetics implanted inside. Med paw to kind of recreate the orbital floor. And as I said, silicone, which was behind the ocular, to try and create volume behind the ocular cavity, to try and implant an artificial eye in the end. So in 2010, I found a maxillofacial surgeon that said to me that he could use an alloplastic implant to bridge the gaps between the broken maxillar area. 3 weeks later, this was kind of what my face looked like. I always tell the story like this, I got into my car, and as I said in the video, I pulled down the rear view mirror. I felt this fluid on my face, and I started panicking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what this was. And for the next year, I battled like this. I kept seeing infection coming out like this, eating the flesh on my face away. One of the biggest problems that I had was that my doctors kept referring me between them. They kept prescribing antibiotics between them, and nobody took accountability. Sorry. So here's an example of one of the surgeries that they did, where I had a facial reconstruction, and there was just debridement after debridement after debridement. No diagnostics. Nobody came to me and said what this infection was. So after that, eventually my plastic surgeon came forward and said to me, I think we need to take this prosthetic out. I know that the maxillofacial surgeon keeps saying that it mustn't come out, but it needs to come out. And so he took it out. And I woke up like this, and I realized that there was so much tissue eaten away by this MRSA. At that point in time, I didn't know it was MRSA, because I thought, why did this plastic surgeon try to take this prosthetic out? And so I phoned the pathologist, and I said, please, can you send me a copy of these tests? And it was the first time in a year that I ever heard or seen the term MRSA. And then I got on the internet, and I was like, well, what is this? Why are these antibiotics not working? Why are all these doctors prescribing these antibiotics, and I'm losing my face? Why is it not working? And so I learned for the first time MRSA. And it was the first time that I could start taking control of my experience. So then I got into the internet, and I started thinking to myself, well, I knew they told me you cannot operate on your face for another year. We can't touch that area for another year, because if we do, we'll aggravate the infection. You need to get over it first, because you've just taken this prosthetic out. Now you need to get over it. And so I got into Google, and I started Googling and thinking, please, can someone help me? So early on, I mentioned that I was in a road accident fund trial that accumulated 53 medical reports. I went and I started reading them during that year. And I started putting them into 4 pages, and I started emailing different doctors over the world who were visible online. And eventually, I always tell people like I struck gold, because there was this face transplant surgeon that actually answered my email. And he said to me, I'm willing to give you a consultation for 30 minutes over Skype. I'm willing to tell you what to do because I see cases like yours all the time. And I accepted it. He was from Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, from the face transplant team in Boston, Dr. Edward Kedison. And he said to me, you need to do a zygomatic osteotomy, which meant cutting the bone. He said to me, use as little foreign objects as possible, as few foreign implants as possible, and from there do touch-up surgeries. So what I did was I drove around Johannesburg, which, I mean, is, you know, if you've ever been to Johannesburg, we're very distant to what Geneva is. So eventually I found a doctor there that mimicked what he said. He wasn't online, couldn't find him in the first place. So he did the surgeries, and so this is what my face looks like today. Made up of a lot of titanium implants, hardly any bone left, hardly any bone. So after we did the surgery, we had a recurring, and the infection came back again 3 weeks later. But Professor Randiger said to me, okay, we need to rotate antibiotics now. We need to rotate them. So I was on different types of antibiotics until eventually it healed. This was probably about 3 months later. This was after the second surgery, which Dr. Kedison said from Boston that we should be doing, until finally, 9 years later, never thought I would be able to look at myself in the mirror again. This is what I was able to get to. So, as hospital-acquired infection, MRSA, before I became a patient advocate, I was in advertising for 18 years. For 18 years, I had a business, and so I used to walk around hospitals and get really upset when I saw that there wasn't advertising for patients, because one of the biggest things that really upset me was that I never knew what antibiotic resistance was. So when I stopped my course of antibiotics, I just didn't go, why did I do that? Because I never knew that that could cause worse problems. So I'll talk about this more on the 12th on Thursday, but these are my basic ideas. The first thing for me was information pack before being admitted to any hospital, digital and printed. I mention the word printed because I come from a low and middle income country. We can't afford very high, expensive types of advertising that the rest of the world can. So manage the infection as a team, and I'll get onto that now. Build tools to improve collaboration and care coordination. Stop working in silos. Stop trying to manage our infection from different points. Okay, so I'll get onto that now again. Help patients track their infection and send feedback to the doctor. So let me start with the first one. I've been watching what everybody talks about with infection prevention and control, and they're talking about multidisciplinary teams, but I don't really think that they are moving further beyond really what is important. So in my case, my team, when they started saying, are you keeping that artificial eye sterile because it is another foreign body? And this was also what Dr. Kedison taught me. I had this acrylic artificial eye on my face, but I wasn't healing, and it wasn't taught to me by my nurse or doctor. It was taught to me by my ophthalmologist and my prostheticist, my oculist. These people are not part of the team. Blepharitis was the last point in time where I had the last bits of infection that I had to deal with. really resistant blepharitis that was stuck on my eyelids, that I had to go to the ophthalmologist and say, how do I deal with this? Because a nurse wasn't saying that to me. So this is really where, like I say, multidisciplinary teams for my case was really important. Help patients to track their infection. Again, on Thursday, I'll get really more into detail with this, but I felt a very huge disconnect between me and my doctor. I wanted to go home and I wanted to somehow report how bad my infection was getting onto something. Was it my medical record or somewhere? But all I wanted was my doctors to know how bad I was. But I didn't have that tool. I didn't have that way of doing that. So we need to build tools that make it possible for patients to connect with their doctors, to tell them, is it in my imagination or is my infection actually getting worse? So to end, okay, we're talking a lot about working with clean hands between healthcare professionals. For me as a patient, this was a full-time job, and it still is a full-time job for me, because I am full of different prosthetics in my face. So all I'm asking is that you teach patients when they're sitting in their hospital bed, to be part of the team. Thursday I'll talk more about it as well, but for example, we touch our cell phones. I was putting the cell phone against my ear. I was touching people's hands, I was doing whatever. We are part of the team in infection prevention. Not only in the hospital, it moves beyond hospital walls as well. I live with this. I lived with it for a year. My nurses went there all the time. So thank you for having me. And yeah.
Thank you, Vanessa. I think this was really the really perfect opening talk for ICPIC, and I really can only congratulate you. I know it's so courageous to speak to such a large audience, and thank you so much. Really great. So without further delay, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Yves Lontin from Jewish General Hospital in Montreal to talk about patient participation. Yves is, of course, not speaking as a patient, but more like a infection control professional. Yves is an associate professor, and he trained both in Canada and also in Switzerland. It was a great pleasure to host him for 2 or almost 3 years in Geneva. So thanks for coming over, and we're more than happy to listen to your talk. Thank you.
Just click, I guess. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at this conference. There are many, many ways in which we can involve patients in hand hygiene and infection control. We just had a brilliant demonstration by Ms. Carter of one of the ways that a patient can be involved, which is as an activist and a voice, and to change and to have an impact on policymakers. There are other ones as well, and this is what we'll be reviewing today over the next few minutes. These are my disclosures, but none of them are related to the topic at hand. So over the next few minutes, I'll be presenting you, give you an overview of the many, many different ways we can involve patients in hand hygiene and infection control. I'll be also reviewing some of the data regarding its effectiveness in preventing HAIs, and also give you some tips and ideas so you bring something home as well. So hand hygiene. Probably many of you know a lot of things about hand hygiene, so I don't know what to add to what you already know. Widely seen as the single most important measure to prevent nosocomial infections. And this is, not surprisingly, the reason why so much energy has been put in promoting hand hygiene. And since the 2009 guideline on hand hygiene, which proposed the multimodal hand hygiene promotion strategy, the Geneva model, we have made, I think, tremendous improvement in compliance rate, probably starting from lows of 10, 20% compliance to highs of 60, 70%. But what about 2019? What about 10 years later? What's happening? Well, I think more and more people are seeing that they're plateauing and improving hand hygiene compliance. It seems that obtaining rates over 80% seems to be very, very difficult to achieve, especially when you're talking about wide, big hospitals. And this is probably the situation in many, many different hospitals around the world. And the question is it time now to add new components to a multimodal strategy? And among them, is it time to involve patients in hand hygiene? And could it help us break this ceiling and reach higher levels? When Andrew Stewartson, who's now in Melbourne, was in Geneva, he conducted a multi-centric, multinational survey asking hospitals, how do you involve patients in hand hygiene promotion? And there were 5 main components that came up the most frequently. And I'll be going over each of them, starting from the most frequently cited to the less frequently cited over the next few minutes. So the first one, obviously, is patient hand hygiene, encouraging patients themselves to perform hand hygiene. It is important because it allows us to reframe the message, taking hand hygiene out of the hands of healthcare workers and asking patients as well to contribute to safety by performing hand hygiene themselves. It also helps us stop finding scapegoats, as always blaming healthcare workers as being the source of HAI in hospitals. One of the challenges we have right now regarding the indications for patient hand hygiene is that there's not really a consensus right now regarding what are the indications for patient hand hygiene. We have 5 moments for healthcare workers, but what about patients? Some hospitals are using 4 moments, before and after touching your wounds or devices, before eating, after using the restroom, or when entering and leaving your room. Other centers are also arguing in favor of a 5th moment, which is encouraging patients to do hand hygiene whenever a healthcare worker enters their patient zone, as a reminder. While other countries like Canada are going the other way with less moments, 3 moments, among them being cough etiquette, encouraging patients to do hand hygiene after coughing or sneezing. Regardless of the number of moments you have, how often do patients comply with hand hygiene indications? Michael Gardam from Toronto conducted a systematic review looking at strategies, interventions to improve patient hand hygiene, and he identified 10 studies addressing the topic at the time. 8 out of 10 were uncontrolled before and after studies, which would consider as lower level of scientific evidence. But we have to remember that this is where hand hygiene for healthcare worker was 20 years ago. This is the kind of studies that was done. We just have to give it some time, and the level of evidence will improve with time. The good news is that all these studies had positive outcomes. There can always be a publication bias, but it's probably the sign that there is a real signal, a real impact of these interventions. In terms of how do you improve hand hygiene compliance for patients, it seems that we're heading towards another Geneva model, this time for patients, which has to include both education, reminders, auditing, feedback, and the provision of alcohol-based hand rub solutions. In terms of compliance, they'll probably the same way healthcare workers have a harder time complying with some indications, especially moment 1. It seems that patients also have a hard time complying with indications such as when entering or leaving the room, but are more compliant with indications such as performing hand hygiene before eating or after using the restroom. You can always argue that 30% compliance after using the restroom, that there's still room for improvement, but I'll leave it up to you. Let's say you're a bit short in resources, and you're thinking, well, I want to improve hand hygiene compliance, but I don't really have the resources to do a full multimodal strategy. Is there a way I could improve hand hygiene without having to do all this stuff? Well, Vincent Cheng from Hong Kong had this very good idea of doing directly observed hand hygiene. This consists in electing a hand hygiene ambassador on a ward who would go see every patient every 2 hours and drop some alcohol-based hand rub solution in their hands, forcing them to do hand hygiene. Forcing, of course, it's voluntary. But doing this was associated with a significant increase in hand hygiene and product consumption of 9 milliliters per patient per day. So that's 4 or 5 additional hand hygiene per patient. Very clever. And it was also associated with a significant decrease in the level of contamination of the environment with MRSA and carbapenem-resistant Acinetobacter. So potentially a very effective, and I would say cost-effective way of promoting patient hand hygiene. The other way we can involve patients in hand hygiene is to increase their level of education. As you know, health literacy is important. It empowers patients, gives them the confidence to be able to take decisions in their own care. But at the moment, many of them still have a false perception of the reality in hospitals. If you ask patients, do you think healthcare workers do hand hygiene? More than half of them think that nurses and doctors do hand hygiene all the time they should, which is not the reality. And this is why some organizations like the CDC are taking the very blunt approach, saying patients need to know the truth. For example, in this pamphlet from the CDC, they say healthcare workers clean their hand less than half the time they should, which is a reality. You can also educate patients regarding the technique for hand hygiene, which is a simplified version of the healthcare worker hand hygiene technique. And you can also teach them about how hands spread germs in hospital, that 1 out of 9 patients get an HAI. You can teach them about the healthcare worker hand hygiene indications, and also for proper glove use, like in this pamphlet from Ontario in Canada. I would say the next frontier in terms of patient education will be the internet, because patients want to move away from this one-on-one training by a healthcare worker using a pamphlet. This is old school. It's time-consuming. It's associated with lower retention level as well. Patients want to learn now using the internet. The problem is that as hospitals, we're not occupying that media yet. Internet is the second most trusted source of information for patients after their own doctor and healthcare providers. The problem is that it can be very alarmist and not necessarily accurate. If you Google some symptoms in Google, you'll probably learn very rapidly that your headache is probably a brain tumor. So it's just to give you an example that the patients go there, but we need to occupy that space. The problem is that we're not very good at it. In a survey of 36 hospital webpages containing information on HAI and hand hygiene, only 12% explain what were HAI. Only a third suggested patient participation strategies, and a quarter explained the rationale for hand hygiene. Another problem is that the literacy level is too high. You need to have achieved a 15-year-old grade at school to be able to understand that content, which is way too high. We need a 9 to 10-year-old level to educate properly patients. Another problem, which seems trivial, is that now hospitals are still creating internet content designed for desktops, and patients don't access information on desktops anymore. Only a third of hospital internet presence is modified to be fully functional on mobile devices. We'll need to improve this over the next few years. Third way we can involve patients in hand hygiene is to engage them in reminding staff to perform hand hygiene when they forget to do so. It is actively being promoted by the Canadian Patient Safety Institute, which encourages patients to remind healthcare workers to perform hand hygiene. Geneva, DDPT with Andrew Stewartson, who is now in Melbourne, but who was in Geneva before, completed what I would call the largest experience looking at the efficacy of that kind of intervention to improve healthcare worker hand hygiene compliance. It's a very large-scale study. It's a cluster randomized controlled trial that compared the efficacy of 3 different interventions. The regular WHO method, the WHO method with enhanced performance feedback, which means immediate feedback of healthcare workers' own personal hand hygiene compliance, or a third component, which is the WHO with enhanced performance feedback and patient participation. The patient participation itself component was multimodal. Healthcare workers were invited to hand over a welcome pack to patients on their hospitalization. There was a pamphlet in there. There was also a personal bottle of hand rub. They reviewed together the patient hand hygiene indications that you find here, 4 moments for this experience. And it was a partnership that was involved in which both parties agreed to remind one another if there was forgetfulness regarding hand hygiene. And this intervention was associated with a significant increase in hand hygiene compliance. The increase over the regular WHO method was a 10 percentage points, 10% increase from 48 to 65%. So the combination of these 3 elements was significantly associated with an improvement in moment 1, which is the one that, for those of you who do epidemiology, is the hardest one to improve among healthcare workers. Now, some detractors mentioned that, but no observers never witnessed a single patient reminding a healthcare worker to do hand hygiene during the entire study. So maybe it's not really the way that patient participation works. Just have to keep in mind that you don't necessarily need direct patient intervention for patient involvement, patient participation to work. The simple fact that healthcare worker was drawing an agreement with the patient regarding the importance of hand hygiene in itself is a way to empower patients and change the behavior of healthcare workers and improve their behavior. There's also the normative pressure in which a healthcare worker who just asks his or her patient, remind me if I forget to do hand hygiene. It's very hard afterwards not to do hand hygiene. And then the direct patient intervention. Finally, you don't need a high proportion of patients who voice their opinion to have an impact, a long-standing impact. A single patient can help and be beneficial to many other patients. A single patient inquiry can induce a long-lasting change in healthcare worker behavior. In a survey of healthcare workers, 80% of them said that a single time they were reminded made them more careful regarding subsequent care, even with other patients. The fourth way we can involve patients is engaging patients in governance, policymaking, and promotion. And I think we just had a brilliant example with Ms. Carter, who gave such a moving and relevant talk. I'm just going to skip this section. That way we can go back on schedule. The last way we can involve patients is to involve them as being auditors of hand hygiene compliance of healthcare workers. Professional organizations are already recommending that kind of approach. In the Joint Commission white paper that has been approved by CDC, SHE, WHO, and the IHI, they recognize that patient observers is probably the most effective way to evaluate hand hygiene compliance in outpatient settings, because direct observation by trained auditors is almost impossible to do in a setting like this. The first study using this strategy is, to my knowledge, the Semmelweis Hand Hygiene Project by Yamada that was conducted in the Army Medical Center in Honolulu. And the intervention consisted in handing over a little card to patients who were waiting in the waiting room of outpatient clinics. It had 2 sides. On one side, they were inviting patients to evaluate the hand hygiene of their healthcare workers. And on the other side, it was a little how do you call that in English? Evaluation form, in which they could report if their healthcare worker did hand hygiene as they were supposed to before caring for them. And they were invited to drop the card anonymously in boxes after leaving the examination room. And it obtained quite impressive numbers of 40 to 75% return rate of the little card and compliance rate of healthcare workers of 80 to 100%. And that kind of strategy has now been uptaken by other hospitals, like Johns Hopkins is also doing that kind of study, McGill University as well. The new way that now people are evaluating is there a way to involve patients, hospitalized patients, to do evaluation of staff hand hygiene compliance? And there's a lot of information that will be presented, and I invite you to attend the presentation of Laurie Côté this Thursday. She'll be presenting results of her own study. It's a master's degree thesis work that she's done, in which she explored how much we can involve patients, hospitalized patients, to evaluate hand hygiene compliance. But I can tell you as a teaser that a huge proportion of patients accept, over 50% of patients who were approached for the study accepted to conduct audits. And that many of them can be trained and certified as well, showing them videos to make sure that they really recognize moment one of hand hygiene and they can rate effectively patients. That they do conduct audits and that it does not negatively affect their perception of the quality of care. Even though all the patients enrolled observe at least one episode of omission of hand hygiene, it actually tended to give them a perception of more positive quality of care because at least they felt that they cared about them. And 90% of patients would be ready to do it again and evaluate other aspects of healthcare, which opens up many different potential avenues for involvement. Could be in the hemodialysis clinic, for example, for the maintenance of fistulas, or the use of PPE, triage, or even involving family members in terms of for the pediatric population. So if you want more information regarding how to involve patients, there are documentation by WHO with information sheets. And also there's a chapter in the Hand Hygiene Handbook which contains a 28-item checklist to guide you through your next patient involvement campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yves. Great talk. So now the last speaker of this opening keynote session is Benedikt Huttner. He's a staff IID physician from Geneva University Hospital, also trained in the US and Iowa, who will talk about patient awareness of antibiotic misuse and resistance, and also the effects of campaigns. Benedikt.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Good evening. It's a great honor for me to speak to you about patient awareness of antibiotic misuse and resistance. These are my disclosures, not directly related to the topic. So when we talk about patient awareness, we have to ask ourselves, is the glass half empty or half full? And what is the first thing when you prepare a talk like that? You look, are there any systematic reviews? And we actually performed a systematic review looking at the impact of patient knowledge on antibiotic use. And as often in the studies, most of these have been performed in high-income countries, very little information from low-middle-income countries. But it's clear that the studies show that lower knowledge about antibiotics and antibiotic resistance is associated in some studies with higher self-medication. It should be, if this is wrong, it's associated with higher antibiotic use for upper respiratory tract infections. And it has some effect on adherence to the treatment, but it can be either higher or lower depending on the study. Now I want to go to some specific country examples, and I just took some recently published studies. As you know, overall antibiotic use in Europe has a wide variation with generally higher rates in the south and lower rates in the north. And I want to look at two studies, one from France, a high consuming country, and another one from Norway. You see on the right side, Norway about half as much antibiotic use as France. Now in France, there has been an antibiotic public awareness campaign now for many years, since 2001. And this is a study in a small town in northern France where they invited medical practice to hand out questionnaires to the first 25 patients per practice. Quite a lot of return, mostly female patients, quite frequent users of a lot of consultations per year, and about half of them had taken antibiotics within the last year. Most of them had positive opinions about antibiotics, but some also negative. When I looked at the study, I was kind of surprised to see, 5.6 consultations per year seemed very high. Actually, if you look at the OECD average, that is, average, if you look for Switzerland, quite low, 4 consultations, France about 6 consultations per year. So these were not excessive users of doctors. Then if you look at the knowledge, I don't want you to go into details, but in general what you see that there is always some suboptimal knowledge in patients knowing if antibiotics are active against viruses, against mushrooms, how they are effective. And then if you look at, if you ask questions not do they work against viruses, but do they work against some diseases like any infections, you have even lower knowledge. And if you look at bacterial resistance, there's quite a lot of patients who feel they don't even have the capacity to answer the question. So even in France, with long ongoing antibiotic awareness campaigns, there's still quite suboptimal knowledge. What is the situation in Norway, a low consuming country? These questionnaires distributed in pharmacies on a different population, 3 different cities, and you see the knowledge in general was quite high, quite good knowledge of antibiotic resistance. Factors negatively associated with antibiotic knowledge was male gender, young age, and a less restrictive attitude towards antibiotic use. But one thing, it's very small here, that comes up in a lot of studies is that there was this misconception that the body gets resistant to antibiotics, so yourself get resistant to antibiotics and not the bacteria. That's something you find in a lot of studies. And so this was the case even in Norway, despite a general overall good knowledge. But let's look at a little bit more globally. The variation in antibiotic use I showed you for Europe. It also exists across the globe. Here, the countries in red had an increase in antibiotic use over the last few years. And if you look at the United States, there was a recent study in North Carolina in primary care clinics and urgent care locations where they did a survey and also some semi-structured interviews. And it's a finding I told you before about, that knowledge of appropriate use of antibiotics was associated with lower use, or lack of knowledge led to higher antibiotic use. And they also did a qualitative analysis. And again, here's a lot of text, not necessary to go into detail, but there is still quite some confusion about which illnesses can be treated with antibiotics, how to take antibiotics. There's also a perception that physicians are not necessarily consistent in their use of antibiotics, and that the information provided by the physicians very often is suboptimal. Let's go to Japan. This was a survey that was based on a European survey. I'll show you some results later on. So adult patients, or the adult public, medical professionals were excluded. Half of the respondents had taken antibiotics, mostly for the common cold, and the knowledge was quite low. Only 1 in 5 Japanese knew that antibiotics were ineffective against viruses. In the European Union, the average was 43%. And only 7% were able to answer all 4 questions, which I will show you later correctly. Again, lower than the European Union. And only 4 out of 10 had heard about antimicrobial resistance. So since 2 years now, I think Japan has launched also an antibiotic awareness campaign. And you see here with a superhero, and let's see what this will change. Then an example from a low middle income country in South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal, quite a busy hospital with lots of outpatient visits. So about 400 outpatients were interviewed, and you find here also a lot of misconceptions. Again, antibiotics effective against viruses, the belief that antibiotics do not have any side effects. 1/3 requested antibiotics even if the doctor advises against it. Then the sharing of antibiotics with family was done by about 40%, and stopping antibiotics when it was felt that they were not helping. And then last example, this time from Asia. This was quite a sophisticated study done in rural areas in Thailand and in Laos, in different villages. And one problem, for example, that was realized that in the local languages, it's very difficult to express antimicrobial resistance because there is no dedicated word for it. And when you look at so they asked, what do you think is antibiotic resistance? And you see that the correct answer was given by by very few. And again, the most frequent answer was the idea that's also prevalent in many high-income countries, that the body becomes tolerant to medicines. And what is also interesting, if they looked at the correlation between antibiotic awareness and use of antibiotics, there was no clear correlation. So people who were more aware, were better informed, in some areas actually used more antibiotics. Let's try to put things a little bit into perspective. I mean, we are all interested in antimicrobial resistance, but that's obviously not the only problem we face. If you look at a survey of Europeans on the European Union's priorities from 2018, you see that antimicrobial resistance does not appear. One major issue which we hear about a lot is climate change. So I was interested to see what is the knowledge of the public about climate change. I didn't find, unfortunately, too much information, but this is a Swiss study. And you see, 1 in 2 Swiss thinks that the ozone hole is the main cause of the greenhouse effect. So it was a mail survey among about 1,000 Swiss respondents. So I think we have to look at, compared to other major issues, and then maybe the knowledge level regarding antimicrobial resistance is not so bad. And something that's also very clear from climate change knowledge does not necessarily translate into behavior. And if you look just at the correlation between the mean number of correct answers in the Eurobarometer survey and outpatient antibiotic use, you see that there is no very clear correlation. So the 4 questions are: do antibiotics kill viruses? Are antibiotics effective against colds? So both would be no. Does unnecessary use of antibiotics make them become more ineffective? Yes. And does taking antibiotics often result in side effects like diarrhea, which would also be yes. And you see that there are some countries with a relatively low use, which have quite a low knowledge score. And on the other hand, you have countries with a high antibiotic use, which have quite good knowledge scores. And I circled here Luxembourg, Belgium, and France, because these have been countries that have done antibiotic campaigns for quite a long time. So you see that probably it had an impact on the public knowledge, but didn't necessarily then translate into much lower antibiotic use. What about the interaction between patients' knowledge, beliefs, and physicians? And that's something quite interesting, I think. This is from a big European study, over 3,000 adult patients in 13 European countries. And in that study, quite a lot of patients actually, though it was patients with acute cough, a lot of them expected, hoped for, or even asked for antibiotics. But then if you look, were the physicians able to identify the patients who want or requested antibiotics? This was not very good. A poor agreement with real patient attitude. And this has been shown in several studies. So physicians think patients want antibiotics, but this may not really be the patients that really expect them. And if you look then what influenced the actual prescription of antibiotics, it was much less the fact that the patient expected or hoped for an antibiotic than the fact that the clinician thought the patient would request an antibiotic. So this may be an argument also for educating the public, then the physician perceives less this demand, even if it's not right for the individual patient. What about hospitalized patients? There's a picture of our hospital here in Geneva. So there are relatively few data. This is a very small study from the UK with a few inpatients also. So these were in-depth focus groups with people who had received antimicrobials within the last 12 months. So careful selection from a database of over 20,000 citizens, equal gender ratio. And what was found there was that, and we heard it before, that's a common finding in many studies, that they described a failure in communication and information provision from clinicians. So clinicians are not very good at communicating, and that in that study, many patients did not feel that they were involved in the decision-making process around the infection management. We also did a study in Switzerland and other European countries, Croatia, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, in the context of the TRIVE-AB projects. We did interviews, and in Switzerland we also did focus groups here in Geneva. And what we found is, so these were all patients that had recently been treated with antibiotics, that in general, patients trust doctors to take the best decisions for them, also with regard to antibiotics, but they feel inadequately informed. They realize that there is a lack of time by physicians, but there was again and again the wish of patients to be better informed. They felt reassured when they could discuss the antibiotic treatment with others, and there was also the feeling that patients prioritize the individual perspective over the societal perspective, and this is just a quote. Yes, well, you know, if I'm honest, when I need it, I take it. I will not think this is possibly not good for the environment. How can we increase awareness? And WHO has been conducting antibiotic awareness weeks now for several years, and in Europe there have been for over 10 years antibiotic awareness days. If you look at the famous O'Neill report published a few years ago, the #1 suggested intervention is a global public awareness campaign. So now let's look a little bit at the evidence for this recommendation. We did with WHO a review of campaigns conducted all over the world. You see that quite a few countries have conducted these campaigns. Problem is that a lot of these campaigns have not been evaluated, but we looked at the key messages that they provided, and a lot of it is obviously about antibiotic resistance, antibiotic use, self-medication, also some infection prevention. And I'm going to look at some key messages more specifically. This is a finish your prescription and was used by 31 campaigns, so that once you start your antibiotic treatment, you should not stop it even if you feel better. This has been questioned a lot. Why? Because we know that a lot of antibiotic prescriptions are not necessary in the first place, so why would you tell a patient to finish it necessarily to the end? And the other issue is that probably most prescribers go for too long treatment durations for many patients. And there's been a BMJ article arguing also against this. And you see that the news is part also of the problem because it's about science communication. This is from The Guardian, so a good, serious journal. It says, rule that patients must finish antibiotic course is wrong, study says. This was not a study. This was an opinion piece. There were no data presented, right? This is, it then becomes a little distorted, and I think we have to be careful how we communicate findings and to the public. Another example I show frequently, this is from a randomized, not from a random, from a control trial in Italy, where they took in Emilia-Romagna different regions for an antibiotic campaign with mass media, and then they surveyed before and after, looking at the knowledge. And what you see here is that after the interventions, actually fewer people were able to provide the correct answer, antibiotics are effective against viruses, yes or no. And why is this the case? We know that it's difficult to communicate facts. There's truth amnesia, there's pseudo amnesia. Patients may know, yes, there is something with antibiotics and viruses, but they don't know which way it goes. So really quite tricky to communicate this correctly. Do they work? Nevertheless, this is a review just published looking at antibiotic awareness interventions in the US over 20 years, quite a few randomized trials, all aimed at adults, and you see a lot of them are targeted also physicians, and I think this is important. Very few used mass media, so these were mostly small-scale interventions, but most of them showed favorable changes for at least one of the major outcomes, 73% reductions in antibiotic prescribing, and but none of the interventions that only targeted the public without the physician showed an effect. So I think really this is something to keep in mind, that if we do these interventions, we also need to target probably the physicians. Most showed an increase in knowledge. There have been some national campaigns that have been evaluated. The most famous examples are Belgium and France. I'll show you the results for France, which look very good in the beginning, right? You have here in 2001 the implementation of the campaign, and you see quite an important decrease in overall antibiotic use, so everybody is happy. If you look a little longer, it doesn't look as good anymore because antibiotic use actually slightly increased since then. And if you compare it to the mean European use, antibiotic use in France remains very high. I mean, obviously some partial success, but difficult to sustain it in the long run. If you look at community level interventions, again, do not look into the detail, but you see that most of them had an effect and reduction in antibiotic use. Question always is how long can you then actually sustain it? You see that the duration of most studies is actually quite short. So antibiotic use is complex. There are many factors influencing it. Public knowledge plays a role, but it's only one of the factors. There are many other regulatory issues, prescribers, etc. So one issue that's also quite interesting, where we have some studies, but is to try to educate already the children about antimicrobial resistant antibiotic use. There's a program now for many years in Canada, in Alberta, Do Bugs Need Drugs? And there's some studies going on also in Europe and other countries looking really to try to educate already children. So the conclusion, I think there is in most countries public awareness about the risks of antibiotic misuse and antibiotic resistance, but large variation among countries. Knowledge remains suboptimal and some misconceptions persist. I would say it probably plays more of a role in the outpatient setting. And important to keep in mind also that knowledge awareness does not necessarily always correlate then with behavior. Public campaigns have a role to increase awareness and knowledge, but the scientific evidence regarding the long-term impact on antibiotic use remains somewhat suboptimal. And improving the knowledge and awareness of the prescribers in addition to the public seems key. And I think, again, it's communication with patients, very important, and also to more actively involve patients into the decision-making process regarding antibiotics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benedikt. So clearly there is more work for us to get patients informed, involved, and make sure that they're at the center stage of our future activities, both for antibiotic resistance, nosocomial infections, antibiotic awareness issues, etc. So now, of course, you all wait for the reception, but we still have a little surprise. So I ask Professor Pittet for joining us on the scene.
Ladies and gentlemen, highly esteemed scientists, preventers of infections, and all of you ologists, caregivers, healers, and heads of research, a big thanks to those who could escape from their work to join us for the greatest show on Earth. That is to say, the greatest one in IPC. So hang on tight and come with me. I promise it's painless, if not exactly quick. And I'm thrilled to welcome you all to ICPIC!
Welcome one and all to the International Conference on Infection Prevention and Control. Please get ready to rock and roll. Experts come from near and far. Some need introduction, some we know who they are. Over 100 countries are represented. 1,200 people fit inside of this tent. There's something here for everyone, for parallel programs going on all at once. You can meet with the experts and ask your questions. Come and discover something new in a session. Welcome one and all to the International Conference on Infection Prevention and Control. Please get ready to rock and roll. Developing countries are well represented. We've made scholarships so that they can present us the best work done. Cause we all know that germs don't stop at borders, and we all need to learn. Over 500 IPC abstracts were chosen to be celebrated and turned into posters, the best of which will become presentations. We're bathing our breath for your detailed explanations.
Welcome one and all to the International Conference on Infection, Prevention and Control. Please get ready to rock and roll.
Top abstracts are picked by a secret jury to compete with each other for cash and for glory. They're pitched at the final. We await the surprise of who wins the Innovation Academy Prize.
Our party is anything but low-key. We all get dressed up and now our karaoke. IPC must be champion all over the globe. Its mission is crucial in this world to belong. Welcome one and all to the International Conference on Infection, Prevention and Control. Please get ready to rock and roll.
IPC's fixation on precise explanations, on specific indications for ever-growing implications. Praying devices and applications result in finer calibrations so that we can save more lives with new tools and information. We battle on the front lines against Endero mutations, brave the endless citations, darken swamps of misinformation, never-ending agonization of grant applications, of journal publications, which may result in the ablation of our social relations and renunciation of all but this essential infatuation, this shining vocation to explore our fascination and publish before our expiration.
Conference on Infection, Prevention and Control. Please get ready to rock and roll.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. It's now time to drink. Let's have a drink and enjoy a network. Thank you very much. Great ICPIC. Welcome to everyone to Geneva. Thank you all. And thank you all to our special team.